Chiefs and Deers, welcome. It's Bronzebird here with another video. You know what to do. Like and subscribe. So, in no particular reason, I decided that I was going to make this video today to touch on an issue that I do seem a lot prevalent with a lot of these college students, in which they're trying to invoke this whole entire liberalism crap, in which they try to use the whole entire oppression Olympics and fearing of this territorial type of way of interrogating different nations, more so-called white people, when it comes to institutions. Therefore, this type of video takes place at a college in which a so-called black woman, a young so-called black woman, and I believe a so-called Latina is in a video addressing two so-called white men who is sitting studying in some type of space that they allowed to happen because of the school board and this, that, and the third. And they figured, like, because they see the sighting of two so-called white boys, that they take it upon themselves to call them out for exploiting their white privilege. And also just the idea that one of the so-called white dudes had a sticker that said "Police Lives Matter" or something like that, which usually triggers a lot of emotions from pro-blackity blacks or Black Lives Matter affiliates and all these different things like that. And this is my thing. I understand the whole entire racism of police brutality. I do understand the idea we obviously live in a world of so-called white supremacy, right? The idea of the power dynamics and this, that, and the third of being a so-called white man, in which I believe a lot of so-called black people believe that so-called white people are rich, or they have some type of privilege where it's so innate they don't even notice it. In certain instances, I can say, yes, that's true. But in other instances, I can't even say that's true, okay? I don't get into these oppression Olympics as a so-called black man, so-called African-American, whatever have you, of this nation in the US. My belief system is, at the end of the day, there's just certain things, obviously, that has nothing to do with what's the subject at hand. These are two innocent so-called white dudes just studying in a hall, minding their own business, and you got mad over a police sticker. And I wasn't really going to do this video, but I figured, hey, I want to give my perspective because it seems very ridiculous and frivolous. But I just figured, hey, why not? I got to put a video out there for y'all to view and look at the nonsense and understand this is what's happened at these colleges and universities, because I believe a video like this happened a couple of times, and usually the target is so-called black women. So-called black women are usually the predators of these situations, because I don't usually see so-called black men, daring to argue with a so-called white man about this whole entire idea of privilege and him exuding this idea of white supremacy because it's a so-called white dude sitting in the hall minding his own business studying. I mean, I seen it in, Virginia? The video of in Virginia, some so-called black woman made an announcement that they feel some type of way about so-called white men being in their hallway, or so-called white people. And then 2015 about a so-called black girl that made a whole entire stink about a so-called white dude wearing an afro or wearing some type of hairstyle and saying that it's them stealing a culture. I mean, a lot of times today, I don't think a lot of people understand what culture is. They view this whole entire aspect just because you wear a certain hairstyle, or because you would listen to a certain type of music, or because you produce some type of music, that's culture. Then you have to realize this is the US. This is a corporation where, it's a melting pot of different cultures. I don't think a lot of them is unique or original. You understand? They mix all these different things together to form cultural diffusion, okay? The melting pot. So I'm gonna share my screen right now so I can show you this video, fair use, of course, just so I can give you an idea about my perspective on what I believe is BS, but that's just my perspective at the end of the day.
What did I do wrong?
You have it better.
You're offensive. Police lives matter?
You have the same sticker.
We're just trying to do school.
What?
You guys have the same sticker of the other.
But this is our space. We've got a Police Lives Matter sticker, and we're getting kicked out. Can't do school.
And you see that? This is already an argument to happen. I want y'all to see this. Because usually a lot of the times, a lot of these liberals do stand themselves to be Democrats, and they look for a reason to say some type of things about, you know, controversial issues. I mean, the idea of police matters, and then this guy wearing a shirt that said did not vote for Biden, it might cause a response. It might cause a reaction. And this is why I know this society is starting to become very hostile, childish, banal, and all these different things out here, because it makes no sense to cause an argument over something that shares no basis. You understand? It doesn't share any basis. It shares nothing that's very important. If you didn't like these so-called white men being in your quote-unquote space, what was the reason for interrogating them? Go somewhere else. And you making a big deal over a goddamn sticker? And again, this is why I say this is usually so-called black women doing this. I dare anybody to debate me and say this is not true. You don't usually see so-called black men getting involved in stupid politics like this because there's a so-called white guy having a police matter sticker. And before we move on, into this video, people have to realize being a police officer is an occupation. Yes, does it have racial history? Absolutely. Just like anything else that happened in history thus far has some type of racist history. Okay, so it's not just the police, it's also other things as well. I understand that it comes from the idea and concept of slave catchers and all these different things. It does. But even these college institutions, HBCUs and all these different things, it didn't even start by so-called black people. It started by so-called white people. So it's something that I think a lot of these liberals need to think about.
You just said we have to leave.
No, I said you're making the space uncomfortable. But you're white. Do you understand what a multicultural space? It means you're not being centered.
White's not a culture?
No.
Wait, hold on. So, I mean, honestly, when they're saying multicultural, all they're saying is race, okay? I know I had to stop the video again, but this is the bullshit that they want to sit up there and use against these so-called white dudes that's just minding their own business studying. Multicultural, so that would mean that they're included in the space as well. You don't know if this man has an Irish background, an Italian background, all these different things. He's just white in your eyes. You understand? Like I said, it's always that bullshit.
No, it's not a culture. It's white is not a culture. Say it again to the camera. You think whiteness is a culture?
This is insane.
So anyways, this is the violence that ASU does, and this is the type of people that they protect, okay? This white man thinks he can take up our space, and this is why we need a multicultural space, because they think they can get away with this shit.
I'm gonna sit here the whole time, and you can find somebody to kick me out.
That's cool. We will.
We're asking you to leave if you have any consideration for people of color and our marginalized.
So clearly don't.
And all of this is because that white boy has a police matter sticker on his damn laptop. You understand? I mean, look, listen. Nobody says anything in these college institutions. I used to go to college. My last college was very liberal. So I can understand that, you know, certain people getting their feelings and this, that, and the third. It never really got out of control. I mean, sometimes you did see fights and you did see people having disagreements, but, you know, it was a liberal school. And when I was at that liberal school, I can remember time and time again, they went ahead and tried to make these so-called white professors feel bad for being so-called white and talking about white privilege and all this shit. I used to be involved in that whole entire topic as a conversation as a so-called African-American, especially when I found it a little bit astounding when I was being taught some type of history, especially so-called African or so-called Black history by a so-called white teacher. I found it very profounding. And then, you know, the whole entire conversations about how these so-called white dudes is able to go to these Ivy League schools and learn all the information about our people and so-called Africans and all this other stuff. And it starts to become a whole entire thing. And, you know, the so-called white teacher starts to become all type of, you know, guilty, because you see it all in his face. They become so guilty and they be like, you know, well, you know, I'm just trying to learn and I'm trying to figure it out and this, that, and the third. And they instill themselves in trying to have conversations with so-called Black people. But in this instance, right, again, my thing about it is interrogation over something very banal and very frivolous, such as a so-called white dude just minding his business with a police sticker. I mean, the guy is not going to change. He just decided to put it on there. I don't think he was on there to try to, you know, aggravate, you know, the people that's making this video. Because, you know, everything now is social media. So as soon as you say something, you do something, you're liable for, you know, ridicule.
Yeah, the whole rest of the campus, the second floor, the first floor, the whole MU, every single part of the campus centers you. This is the only space that you're not centered, and you're still trying to center yourself, which is peak white cis male bullshit.
You're not.
You are racist. Your sticker is racist because police, that's a job. You can choose to be a police. I don't choose to be black.
And the logic of what the so-called black woman is saying is usually just the idea of getting back at them for something they wasn't involved in. I'm pretty sure this girl that's talking right now was born in the late 90s, early 2000s, okay? She doesn't know shit about what happened in the 60s, in the 50s. Yes, she knows the history, but she wasn't there. And the thing about it is, I can understand the imagery, because they're picturing the imagery of the segregation that happened in these institutions, these public transportations, restaurants, and amenities that happened in the 40s and the 50s, primarily in the South. This is not to say that it didn't happen in the North either, because there were segregations in the North as well. And it happened in different parts of the country. I'm not denying that at all. When they was calling you guys colored and Negro, you understand? But my thing about it is you cannot relate the whole entire thing of the 1950s going along with this imagery of segregation and then trying to flip it on the so-called white man. The so-called white man knows that he's able to get away with a lot of shit, but then there's also so-called white men who are very much innocent in these situations and have no idea what the fuck you talking about when it comes to segregation. You understand? And this is not me caping for so-called white dudes. Like, I don't. I understand we live in white supremacy, the whole entire thing, but certain things do not call for actions like this to take place. You understand? And I did see this happen in my school, like I said before. It was much more, you know, clubs and all these meetings that happened that was talking about the school is racist or they have racist tendencies and all this other stuff. I've been there. And usually when it came to a lot of these things, so-called black women such as this only get their kick and get their start off of hanging out with other social groups such as LGBTQ and a couple of other groups out there that is very liberal. That's why the LGBTQ community especially gains a lot of stakes in these conversations, because they want to fill this whole entire idea of being an outsider, of being an outlaw, of being these people out here who's not appreciated by the better good of society. You understand?
Okay? No, you can choose to be a cop. You can choose to kill people with a badge, and you're protecting that shit, which means that you're racist.
I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to defend you guys.
I know, but this offends us automatically because these people kill people like me and like us, right?
This bitch don't know what the fuck she's talking about. And like I said, a lot of these Gen Z and millennials get a kick off of saying shit they don't know what they're talking about. This is like saying every police officer is bad and every so-called black man is a thug. We know that damn well that's not true. Now they try to relate an occupation to a personality. So obviously when you're a cop, you are liable to be a racist, even if you are a so-called black person. They don't attach the occupation from the nationality that is involved in the workforce, but they want to make sure that the so-called white man knows that he's racist for being a police officer or affiliate for supporting police in the force. The occupation, like I said before, I had a conversation about this before. If you watched the Brownstone Powwow, or if you've watched a lot of my videos, or if you had a conversation with me in real life, in which I try to say, I don't look at police officers on my day-to-days and say all of them is racist. I've had conversations with cops. Cops have sat there and told me I understand exactly what they're saying, especially the prevalent matter that happened last year with George Floyd, in which the police officers literally told me that they understand exactly where the pain is coming from, but they can't do anything about it. They feel sorry, but you know, this is their occupation. This is how they earn money, and this is their livelihood. You understand? And then you go into certain places, the so-called black people's emotions are so ran high. They want to curse, they want to scream, they want to be like, ah, fuck the police, and this, that, and the third, man. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible.
You're promoting our murderers, so please just don't do that.
Sticker affecting you negatively. They're just trying to
I wish
Thank you. Thank you.
So why should
If it comes to help.
Because do you understand that police lives matter was in response to Black Lives Matter?
pay the same fucking tuition as you?
Yep.
Hold on, but
Yeah, that's fine. And you have everywhere. You have.
I'm working 60 hours a week while going to school because my parents don't just give me money.
Yeah, it doesn't.
And I'm gonna share my thought process on that. The idea that police lives matter was in response to Black Lives Matter. Now, yes, I do understand that when it did come to certain people, there was extremists that wanted to go ahead and use the idea of police lives matters to combat against Black Lives Matter, and certain other ones that just felt as if like, hey, why are we sitting up there discriminating against police officers all because, you know, they're just doing their job. Not every police officer is an evil person. They're just a person with a badge that's doing what they're doing as an occupation. You understand? And, you know, Black Lives Matter, of course, wants to go ahead and spin their narrative. They're still very much doing what they're doing today and trying to paint the picture that pretty much every institution that comes involved with some type of crime or discrepancy on a so-called Black person or someone out of the LGBTQ community is a racist and a bigot and a homophobic person and all these different things out here. I mean, this doesn't escape the issues, but I definitely just want to say that I'm really starting to realize, and I mean, honestly, it does go that way, but colleges is nothing more but a cesspool for liberalism today. I'm not saying it wasn't like that in the past and this, that, and the third. It's a cesspool for liberalism. And, you know, you get a lot of these ones that's in these clubs and, you know, these social groups and all this other stuff that get a kick on trying to interrogate so-called white men for randomly sitting in a hall where there's different nationalities there and trying to say, you don't belong here. Trying to use the whole entire 1950s era and trying to make it seem as if segregation should be remixed upon you as a so-called white man. Like I said before, the so-called white man knows he has the power and he knows that he's in this whole entire thing. He knows he has the upper hand. So-called Black women like her getting this whole disarray. And into my thinking, a lot of the bullshit happens with a lot of these so-called Black women that go along with these clubs because they'll fuck a so-called white man. They'll sit up there and say, oh, no, I can't stand so-called white men and this, that, and third bullshit. He gives you an opportunity when it comes to certain things, you'll take it. He gives you the dick, you'll probably take it too. And I'm not saying it's all so-called Black women, but it's certain so-called Black women that's revolutionary and be on that bullshit with Black Lives Matter will fuck a so-called white man. But they want to have their cake and eat it too. I see it all the time. So they can miss me with the bullshit. I mean, these colleges, at the end of the day, you make your choices of what you try to do, man. I don't believe in joining a lot of these social groups and stuff like that. They're just rooted in liberalism, and you know how I feel about liberalism. It gets nowhere. It's more of these type of things of causing mischief and causing arguments off of something that's not even worth it. You understand? And so-called Black men, stay out of this too. You don't need to be involved in bullshit like this. Go ahead and do your studies and get where you need to get to in your major. That's it and that's all. Otherwise than that, peace.